It's now my pleasure to introduce Kai Hattendorf. As we said before, his bio is in the second screen. Please ask questions via the second screen during his presentation. And the reason I asked him to come to speak with us today is because he is literally representing the global exhibition industry. So he is everywhere around the world. He's got research, he's got offices everywhere around the world, and he's going to give us a global point of view about the exhibition business. Kai? Stage is yours.
Thank you. It's great to be on the stage. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to DC. It's always great to come back because I actually graduated here in 1999, and it was a different time, different DC back then, but it's always great to be back. So thanks, Sam, for the invitation, and to Sam and his team, congratulations on yet another outstanding ECEF. The room is packed, and the conversations I had show that you again got a great list of people to come to your event. Now, Sam asked me to basically fill the gap between what's happening here in the US and what we affectionately know as the other 75% of the world market outside of the US. So it's a lot of ground to cover, so I'm pleased to have the big screen. And I was thinking long and hard how to get into this and which story to bring to you and to share to you based on that kind of global outreach that we have as UFI, the Global Association for you guys. And I decided to start actually 110 years ago with these two gentlemen over here. In case you don't know them or haven't seen them in a while, they're Robert Peary and Matthew Hansen. Robert Peary was a US Navy engineer, and Matthew Hansen was the guy who helped him get to the North Pole. These were actually the two first men ever to reach the northernmost point of the planet to this year 110 years ago. And that was, you have to remember, there was a time when there was nothing like digital technology or satellite images. So what they saw on their journey to the North Pole, to the northern end of the world, were what was seen for the first time by people. And it was an amazing time. And I remember I grew up reading all these stories about these explorers from that time. And it instilled in me a deep belief that some things are simply given to be in a certain way. So there's the North Pole at the northernmost point of the world, and there it is, and there it will always be, and it will never shift and change. Now then you stop being 7, 8 years old, you grow a bit, and you have a science teacher who tells you that there's another North Pole, known as the magnetic pole. And then he tells you an even more scary thing, that thing isn't there, but it's somewhere over here, and it's actually moving. So one of the lessons was, for me, as a then young teenager, you can't take things for granted. And actually, a few months back, I remembered this story because I saw this headline in Forbes magazine saying that Earth's magnetic pole has officially moved. I thought, so okay, what's the big deal? We know it is moving a little bit, and every now and then I'm sure there will be a scientific body sitting down and saying, and now we've moved the pole from here to here, and now it's 5 meters over there or 5 feet over there, and everybody please adjust your navigational system and everything that's based on the magnetic field of the Earth. But when you actually read beyond the second paragraph of the story, it says that indeed there's a scientific body called the World Magnetic Model. I'm sure they have an association. I'm sure they run a show. So Sam, there's someone to add to the roster. And at their conference, right enough, they were discussing that they couldn't stick to the normal schedule of reviewing the position of the magnetic pole of the Earth every 5 years and then say it has moved a little bit. Because right now, ladies and gentlemen, the magnetic pole of the Earth that you see moving very gently here in the 1700s is moving at an ever faster speed. There it starts jumping. Chuck. It's actually by now moving at a speed of 7 miles a year. Now, this doesn't sound like much, but for scientists, being familiar with kind of long-term thinking, and that's even longer than family offices running shows, long-term thinking, this is a scary speed. And this leads to them discussing whether the magnetic pole of the Earth will actually eventually flip. So we've seen the reversion of polarity when North Pole becomes the South Pole. Well, we haven't seen it, the dinosaurs saw it, every now and then in the history of the Earth, and this has caused a long discussion among scientists whether we may see this in our lifetime. So not always you can take things very much for granted to last also forever through our lifetimes. And then I could connect this story because there's a very similar model used to explain the development of the economic development all around the world. And that's known as the economical pole. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that model. It essentially says if you take the world on a map and add all the economic activity, the center of gravity, where most activity is based, or where the sum of all activities can be geographically located, can be a certain spot, just like the magnetic North Pole. And in 1 AD, this was somewhere over in China, and then for 2,000 years, it has moved far, far west. We had the Middle Ages, we had the civilizations in Europe, we had industrialization, we had the British, the Spanish, and the Portuguese setting sails to go to places. We had the rise of your country as an economic superpower. And all this led, by the 1950s, to the economic center of the Earth being somewhere over here, far, far in the west, and out all the way into the Atlantic. What happened then in 1950 is Japan became an economic superpower, and the whole center shifted slightly to the north. And as Sam asked me to keep you guys engaged in science quizzes, here's a question for you. Where do you think, what happened since 1950? Where do you think the center of world gravity is today? Did it move much further to the west, a little further to the west, pretty much stable? Use your second screen and tell us where you think this economic center has moved in our lifetimes so far. I was told we would play some funky quiz music. Not very funky, but quiz music. Thank you very much. So, yeah, we'll work on the funkiness for the later part. Thank you, everyone. So, the jury is split. There's a strong contingent saying they're basically around 30% saying further to the west or much further to the west, 40% saying a little further or much further to the east, and 9% being as bold as to say much, much further to the east. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here's what has happened since 1950. It has turned slightly by 1960. It has gone further north. That was the impeding collapse of the Soviet Union. By 2000, it has moved further northeast. But then watch what happens between 20 and 2010. Watch what has happened since 2010. And watch what is predicted to happen by 2025. So as Asian economies have grown in importance, as China has grown, India has grown, Southeast Asia has grown to that degree, the economic center of this planet has shifted all the way back to where it was in 1850, just a bit further north. So that may be due to global warming, there are more ships going up there now. But by 2025, it is predicted to be somewhere over the border between northern Russia and China. So don't always take things for granted, and things that you believe in may actually change very fast, be it magnetic poles or be it the economic center of the Earth. So what will this mean for global GDP? Will the world economy actually flip over the next years? Now, here's a wonderful visualization. I hope you can all see it from the back, at least the colors, showing that today, basically 1/4 of the world's GDP is based here in the United States of America. And for those of you who prefer to see that in tables, here's the table. Visual people, millennials, table people are us, yeah? Number 1, US. Number 2, China already. Number 3, Japan. Number 4, Germany. Yay! Number 5, UK. India, France, Brazil, Italy, Canada. It's pretty much the world as we know it. Now, and if you look for a consensus on how this will develop by 2030, you get a pretty different table. And I'll show you the my generation table first, and then the millennial fancy stuff, okay? So here's, ladies and gentlemen, the world forecast for 2030. The UK from 5 out of the top 10. And this has nothing to do with Brexit. It's the global importance. Germany down to number 10, Japan down to number 9, the US down from number 1 to number 3. The new number 2 will be India, and the new number 1 will be China. Now, this is not to say that the GDP in the US or the UK or Germany will stop growing. You see that there's where are we in the future here? You will see that it's still a 60% growth on GDP between now and 2030 over here in the US. Very solid growth and very solid growth opportunities in a very mature economy. Even Germany manages to grow by 64%. Hey, we actually outgrow the US. Japan still grows by 33%, but look at the growth rates in India and China and in markets like Indonesia, Turkey, Brazil, Egypt. I promised you the fancy millennial version. There it is. Again, if you stick with the US, this is very good growth. Yeah? Nobody here needs to be worried about there not being enough economic growth in the US to keep enough food on the table for the economy, for the households. But look at the growth rates in India, look at the growth rates in China, countries Indonesia, Turkey, etc., all really, really growing in economic importance. So let's break that down on exhibitions and events. Now, we've done, just recently with Oxford Economics and support from CISO, research on the global economic impact of exhibitions, and we've broken it down into all kinds of metrics, down to the square meter, or we also have it in square feet, of economic impact. All of your exhibitions, all of your events are generating on-site where they take place. I'd like to point you out to this total economic impact number globally. So right now, of these huge numbers that you've just seen, our industry has a fairly solid share of around close to $200 billion in direct, indirect, induced GDP impacts, and millions of jobs are relying on it, and all the other important things. 4.5 million companies exhibiting, 138 million square meters of booth space, and again, if someone can calculate that into square feet, the number is even bigger, and more than 300 million people attending trade shows, exhibitions every year. And we are poised to grow in alignment with the growth of global GDP. If we do our job right, our industry globally will grow at least the pace of the world economy. World economic growth forecast presently being 3.5 to 4% this year and next. In many markets, our industry is actually outgrowing the general economic development. So our industry is becoming more important in many of the markets. So nothing to be particularly worried about for our industry on the global level. But we will see shifts in importance. And we measure these shifts just like Sam, like you're doing your pulse once a year. We also measure the pulse of the global industry twice a year in something we call the Global Exhibition Barometer. And I brought one result from the latest edition that we published in January 2019, and that is the one about how organizers and venue operators in regions are looking into expansion when it comes to geographic terms, i.e., are they interested in going into another market, into another country? Now let's start with Asia. This color is for those who want to stay in the country they're in, and the other one is for those who want to operate in new countries. Now, even in Asia Pacific, where we see this huge, huge growth that you've just seen on the charts, every third company is actively pursuing a move into at least one other geographic location, opening up to at least one other market. If you look at Europe, we've seen something for the first time in the 12 years that we've been doing this research. For the first time, a majority of all the European players is now actively expanding into other markets. And this already happens on the back of the UK organizers. You remember the world map? There was Vegas, there was DC, and there was London. London, the secret capital of our industry. Many of your largest exhibition organizer companies here in the US are actually listed on the London Stock Exchange. So the majority of these companies, the German messes, the UK-based organizers, the Italian Fieras, they are actively looking to go into new markets geographically. Now, what's it like in the Americas? You guys are somewhere in the middle. We don't do national numbers because we work with all the associations in the respective markets around the world, like CISO here or IAE in the US. So it's their job to deliver the national numbers. We work with regional and global numbers. So we know from trade show executives research that between 20 and 40% of US organizers are looking to go abroad. Gabi is nodding. We know from your polls, I think 28 to 32% are looking, of your constituents are looking into launching a show abroad or take your show international, I think is how you put your question. So between the percentage is higher in Latin America and South America. So globally, our industry is looking to go into new markets to explore new geographic opportunities. So the other thing we asked them in the barometer is which markets are they looking for, where's the biggest potential. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes on sharing some of the best practices, the thoughts, the experiences from international organizers going into new places on how they do it. First, for infrastructure. You've probably all seen this picture, and the new space race has become one of the topics that really captures the world's imagination. Whether it's Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos wanting to put people back on the moon, NASA is working on bringing people back to the moon. The Chinese have landed on the dark side of the moon. No Pink Floyd soundtrack to that yet, but I'm sure it can't be far out. But there actually is another space race in our industry. And that is a global, huge trend into adding more and better quality exhibition and event space as countries and cities and regions are investing into building infrastructure to serve our industry. And this is extremely amazing and wonderfully important. Now, we've all been talking a few years back about the threat of digital and will the halls be empty and will we all talk to each other's chatbots instead of meeting face to face. But all digital has done is to create a bigger need for people to come together to meet face to face. And this is manifesting itself into billions of dollars around the world being invested into new infrastructure. Just 2 weeks back, we had our European conference in Birmingham in the UK, and we had a delegation from the Chinese city of Shenzhen, where they are building a venue that will go live from on September this year, and will have a total footprint of 400,000 square meters of hall space, making it the biggest exhibition venue in the world. And first international shows are scheduled to run in the first half of 2019, and Charlie has been there, and Chet has been there, and Doug Emsley has been there, and they've all been looking at the space and working with the investors on making sure that this space is not just any infrastructure, but it's infrastructure that works for our industry. So, and on the back of this, you have venue developments in Chinese cities whose names I can't pronounce, and you wouldn't understand if I try. And the smallest one of those have something like 150,000 square meters. So behind this huge project that's capturing all the attention are at least a dozen additional projects to add more venue space in China. So you see at the current breakdown of world venue space that the fastest growth right now and the fastest average space of venues we see in Asia Pacific. Still, Europe holds the biggest share of space available globally, and North America is pretty stable, but I'm very happy to see and to read about the investments and expansions in Vegas, in Javits, in, I think, Salt Lake. Who announced last week? $1.2 billion investment into infrastructure? Austin, right? Yeah, so very good. The Germans are investing billions, the French, the Italians, into upgrading their venues. Because the competition for venue space is increasing, which is also very good for all of you organizers in the room, because it means there's no lack of choice if you want to take your show anywhere. So where do you want to take your show? This is another nugget from our global research, where we ask hundreds of organizers around the world twice a year, how do you see your business doing right now? How have you been doing in the last 12 months? And what do you see coming in the next 12 months? And here's the share of them who are forecasting to grow their revenues or turnovers by at least 10% in this first half of 2019. So you were asking for 2020. This is the data for 2019, and there the US is still going strong. So the US is number one together with Italy. Then you have Australia, very, very bullish right now about adding exhibitions. China, the UK, South Africa, Thailand, Mexico, Germany, Brazil. So essentially, what your peers tell you who are active in markets all around the world is that in many, many markets, in all continents, there's growth or there's potential for growth if you take your shows there. As I'm always asked, what about Asia? Asia, the hotspot where everybody should be active. Asia indeed is growing strongly and continues to grow strongly. This is from our Asia research. In 2017, revenues from trade shows in Asia grew by 6.5 or 6.2% compared to 2016. In China, they grew by 8.3%. And again, in China, our industry outperforms the growth of the national Chinese economy as a whole and will continue to outperform again this year. And even Japan, one of the most mature markets in Asia, manages a growth rate of 3% to just over $1 billion by now. So even in very mature markets, the growth is there if you want to look into taking your business there. How do you take your business there? One case I want to share from a show that was launched in 1971, more or less by accident. Who of you remembers the oil embargo of 1971? This is not the millennials, this is the others. Yes. I was lying in a pram then, so I had an energy-efficient mode of transport. So there was supposed to be a Frankfurt Motor Show in 1971 that got canceled because there was no fuel to bring the cars to the show. So the spare part manufacturers said, well, we can run a show. We don't need to bring the cars, we bring the parts. And out of the spare part show, from these very humble beginnings, there's here a bunch of Germans in 1971, looking particularly German, with a BMW, ladies and gentlemen. Freude am Fahren. Out of that grew something which is nowadays internationally known as probably the biggest exhibition show brand in the world, the Automechanica brand. They update this thing every couple of months. I hope I have the latest version. And if I ask my fellow Massive Frankfurt colleagues in the room or alumni, I hope it's up to date. But Dennis will be able to tell you if they've launched 2 more in between. Okay? Dennis is fine. And there's Atlanta on it. And this is the portfolio they're running all around the world because they've taken this brand, they've expanded it, and they've expanded it through all means possible. They have launched themselves, they have entered into joint ventures, they have even handed out franchises, and they've worked with lots of associations in respective markets with a very, very long patience in some cases to take that show to other places. So for them, I think they are, after Informa and Reed, the 3rd largest organizer in the world. For them, the Automechanica brand and the team are kind of their canaries in the coal mine. So if they find a market that the company is vaguely interested in, they send the Automechanica advanced team. And if they come back alive and have filled the show floor, then they look into taking other show brands into the market as well. So this is a case, and they're always happy to share and discuss their case with colleagues in the industry. That's why I'm always happy to share this case study as a way and means of how to build an international show brand over time. The last point, or the second last point, is M&A. We are all familiar with the small fish, big fish thing here. It's a summary from Jochen Witt, one of our members who is doing consulting in the industry, some of the deals that took place with the strategic investors over the last couple of years, and some of them have by now, after they became big fish, being eaten by even bigger fish. Rachel, this excludes 2019, sorry. There's no Mac Brooks and there's no Tarsus on it yet. The story continues, the M&A. And we are all at CISO a few weeks back in Miami, a big discussion again about, is this over? What will the multiples go like, or how high will they go? We've now reached 17 in the case of Tarsus. So Informa got UBM very cheap. But I'd like to point your attention to this very wonderful show. It's the Thailand International Dog Show. And this show, ladies and gentlemen, has earned its place forever in the histories of our industry. First of all, obviously, because a really wonderfully looking dog won a prize and some food in 2017. But also because, watch the upper right corner, a company called Great Wall Exhibitions has bought the majority share in this show in Thailand. making it the first ever show where a Chinese organizer took a majority share in a show outside of China. Remember that name. When you send your sons and daughters and your young staff to whatever trade show school in a few years' time, one of the questions will be in the final exam, which was the first ever show the Chinese investors bought a majority share of in 2017. And you can all say it was? See, getting there. Chinese bidders have been involved in all these deals. They didn't get any of those, but in some of them they got quite close to actually being the winner in the end. So we will see more activity from Chinese investors buying into shows abroad. Which brings me to my last point about how to find out what's the right way for you to do business abroad or to figure out whether you are interested in doing business abroad. And that's essentially, we are a face-to-face industry, building platforms for industries to meet face-to-face. And it's platforms like this, ECEF here, like CISO, like UFIS events all around the world, where you can take advantage of being in a room and have the conversation that Sam was encouraging us all so diligently again today to have. The picture on the right is actually, just for fun again, Cassandra and Diana were also in Birmingham 2 weeks ago, because it's another way how you can reach out. We ran a panel there, and Gabby moderated it from Trade Show Executive about the perspectives for you as organizers to go abroad. And you were also there saying that Europe is the place for you to grow. And I think you had a number of conversations on the day and the day after about, hey, you can come to our place. Why don't we do something together? So it's a great way to reach out to the international community by actually connecting to the international community. It's as blatant a statement as could be to wrap up this talk. I will leave you with 2 questions and lead into the Q&A, because I want to take your pulse now. So after everything you've heard, if you can take your show into one other market, and I don't give you the world, I just give you 7 choices, because 7 is a lucky number. Which of these markets do you want to take your show into? If you don't want to do it, which of these markets would you want to take your show into? Still not funky. It's kind of meditating stuff. Okay. Are you done? People still voting? We're stopping the music, and the winner is China. Hardly surprising. China and India. So you obviously believe in the number 1 and number 2 by 2030. Also Latin America, it's not too far. Mexico, it's also not too far. The Middle East, because it's the Middle East. And Canada. So pretty much in line when it comes to the focus on Asia to what we see from international organizers, and very much in line what we hear when we talk to organizers in North America about going places when it comes to Mexico and Latin America. The second question, oh great, you're doing the clicking for me, I can put the clicker away. Second question is, if you go about that business and take your show to that market, how do you want to do it? Do you want to launch on your own? Do you want to launch with a hosting venue, which is something that's increasingly a service that European venues or Middle East venues are offering you? You want to just buy it and get on with it, or you want to form a joint venture with a local association or organizer? I think that's enough before we all fall asleep. And if you want to know more about that tune, they have it, and you will probably find it on Spotify, or the music service of your choice. So JV with a local association organizer, which is indeed the preferred first step into an international collaboration, because you work with someone who has bodies on the ground, who knows the market you're entering into. It comes with a motion of caution from one of the leading European organizers who spoke also in Birmingham 2 weeks ago, Eric Evera, the CEO of Easy Fares, and in his very unique Belgian way, he always says that if you share the juice of a lemon with 2 people, you've got to produce twice the juice to have the same result. So the squeeze must be worth the juice, he always says. So when you form a joint venture, make sure that you focus on what you want to get out of it, be it knowledge or be it revenue right away. And if you can repeat your name. So.
Yeah, no worries. Thomas, MCI Europe. I just have a question because I saw in your presentation Italy coming up as an increasing market. What is the exact reason? I'm from Europe, I'm just asking.
The Italians believe this is their time. It is, the data is based on organizers from that respective country sharing their forecast. We have seen a long time of not too dynamic developments in Italy because many of the organizers also operate venues and are owned by the cities, and there was a lot of politics involved. Some of the Italian organizers have merged into something known as the Italian Exhibition Group. So breaking that model, breaking down something like, I mean, that's like conquering Rome, right? To get several mayors across Italy to agree on their exhibition business, joining forces into one company. This is challenging Fiera Milano, who is the undisputed leader in Italy, and giving them a run for the money. There has been talk about a merger between Fiera Milano and Bologna Fiera that has fallen flat for the time being, but there's much more dynamics now in the Italian market, and there are actually a bunch of new organizers launching shows in Italy as well.
Okay, thank you. Question in the back.
Yes, hi, this is Sharif.
Hi, Sharif.
Kai, you come from Frankfurt, and you gave us a wonderful example of a very successful geocloning show, which is Automechanica. There are a few of those shows that did not work out. Could you expand a little bit why they did not work out, including in our own country? I'm not sure the experience was very conclusive here.
It is trial and error. If you go into a new market, you can't be guaranteed to be successful. And I think that portfolio of Automechanica shows that I put on screen is the 2019 version. And if you put the 2018, 2017 one on, you will have seen some markets that they tried and that didn't work out or was the wrong timing, or they put it on a hiatus. It's, don't expect every expansion, every geographic expansion to work. But if you want to know specifics about individual investments of Massive Frankfurt, talk to Dennis. But the message to take there is, not everything will, success is not guaranteed and can't be taken for granted, and even the big organizers fail in some geocloning. It's always a complex mix of local players in the market you go into. If you have an incumbent backed by an association, you should avoid a fight. Yeah? Better to form alliances with critical mass of players, but essentially the success of geocloning is based on having a strong exhibitor base that has a joint interest with you in being present in a new market. And so they back you in that move, and you have a strong foundation when you get there. And then you can attract the local market as well. But you will always need local exhibitors to fill your show floor. You can't geoclone based on companies going into, just international exhibitors going into a third country.
Okay, we have a question, second screen.
Sure. What direction does Africa have to play in the future of the exhibition industry? The thought process was that Africa is the place to do business.
My current president is from South Africa, Craig Newman, who runs the Johannesburg Expo Center. And he would answer the question and say, it's time for Africa. And we had our global congress in Johannesburg 2 years back. And it is true that there are pockets in Africa that are developing wonderfully at the moment. And there are a couple of specialized organizers, Montgomery comes to mind, who are very good in finding these niches and helping these markets to develop. South Africa is by far the biggest market. There's a lot of growth happening right now in Egypt. Kenya, Nigeria are markets to look out for. Ethiopia is the dark horse in the race right now. And at the same time, there is a history of developments going well and then being interrupted because of political changes. Last week at IMAX in Frankfurt, I talked to the CEO of the Kenyatta Convention Center, the largest convention center and exhibition center in Kenya, and she has seen her business triple over the last 2 years, and she sees more international organizers inquiring about conferences first, but then exhibitions afterwards coming to Kenya.
All right. Thank you very much, Kai, for a global perspective.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you. Good job. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you all for, again, paying so close attention. We had a very, very fast overview of what's going on in the world from exhibitions and venues. The great space race is certainly, I'll never think of that again the same way. Thank you, Kai.